Welcome to the Anchor Down Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Mills, founder, Anchor Down Leadership LLC, and head football coach, James M. Bennett High School. If this is your first time tuning in, whether you're watching or whether you're listening, I strongly recommend you go back and take some time and listen to the previous episodes, watch the previous episodes. I think that'll give you a great framework for what we talk about, what I talk about, what this organization's all about. If you're returning, thank you again for taking time out of your day to listen to what I have to say. Hopefully it's helping you a little bit. If not, hopefully it's at least forcing you to think about some things, which is always my goal. You may not change your mind. You may not change your opinion. You may not do anything that I suggest, and that's totally okay. But if it forces you to think about what you do, then that's a win in my opinion. So thank you again for tuning in. What is Anchor Down Leadership? Anchor Down Leadership is an organization based upon developing modern day leaders that are value-based. So we want to develop value-based leaders, leaders who are more interested in principle than they are about policy and things like that nature. And not only developing as an individual leader, but then passing on that knowledge, that experience, and those skills to the people underneath of them, making themselves and their organizations more successful and better in the long run. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to get up with me. All the contact info will be at the end of the video. But yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. So today we're going to talk about something that we probably shouldn't talk about. Politics. You say, now, Coach, you're not supposed to talk about politics. You're right. Sammy Kershaw told me that in 1996, and that is a deep cut for anybody who's a fan of 90s country. I strongly suggest you look it up. But we're going to talk about politics. Now, why are we going to talk about politics? A couple reasons. First of all, this is being filmed and recorded 5 days before the 2020 presidential election, arguably the most divisive election we've had in a long time. And tensions are high and feelings are running amok. And we're also doing that in the context of the COVID-19 shadow, which has really triggered a lot of people as far as the response, and then they feel the need to put their response out there as well. So that's kind of the shadow of what we're talking about this. But we're not going to talk about politics as you know it. We're not going to talk about policy. We're not going to talk about where candidates stand, because as far as I'm concerned, as you'll find out in this video, none of that matters to us as leaders. None of that matters to us as people who have followers looking up to us as their example. Instead, we're going to talk about politics and what engaging in politics does to our organizations. And as you'll see, it's not just about politics, but the same concepts will apply in other areas of what we do as a successful organization. So a little bit of background about me. I saw a coach tweet out the other day saying there's a lot of political experts all of a sudden who have no experience in politics. I'm here to tell you I'm one of those opposite people. I have a degree in political science. I was active in politics for 4 years until I finally decided to run for office myself. Obviously, that run was not successful. Here I am talking to you guys, but it was great experience. I now teach U.S. government and have done so for entirely too long, it feels some days. So when we talk about politics, when I talk about politicians, understand I do have a background in that. That is actually what I did for the first part of my adult life before moving on to education. And I don't tell you that to tell you that I'm some sort of expert. I tell you that so that everything I tell you today about politics and politicians comes from experience, all right? Comes from working with people and whatnot. So let's get into it, though. Like I said, we're not talking about politics conceptually. We're not talking about policy and all those things. What I want to talk to you about is how when we as leaders get involved in politics, what that does to our organizations. Politics by its very nature is divisive, okay? Throughout history, engaging in politics has led to division in organizations. And that's kind of the framework of what we're talking about. Understand, though, that I think not the most important, but one of the most important things for any leader in any organization is your reputation. Who people think you are and what people think your organization is about can go a long way towards determining your organization's success. It can go a long way towards shaping public perception of your organization, whether it's an athletic team, it's a business, whatever it might be. Your reputation is paramount. So I want that to kind of be the backdrop of what I'm going to talk about next. So you understand everything I'm saying from here on forward goes toward that concept, your reputation as a leader and your organization's reputation. So when I, as a leader, decide to get involved in politics, right? I decide to back a certain politician. I decide to argue certain political issues, and I'll use some details here in a second. Every time I make any statement that is slightly political, understand that is going to impact the people who follow you. That is going to impact those who look at you. As leaders, as coaches, we have a lot of eyes on us. A lot of eyes. You know, in the context of coaches, we have our players, first and foremost, our people. We have our assistant coaches, right? We have our assistant coaches. We have their parents. We have our building administrators. We have the other teachers in the building. We have the local press. There's probably a lot more, but there are a lot of eyes. You know, football is the king of high school sports. And it's not disrespectful to other sports. It's just kind of the reputation that football's created. So football gets an eye that a lot of other sports don't get. And maybe your organization is similar in whatever field it is you do. You know, we say all the time, you know, I learned this from some Marines growing up. Anytime there's a headline about a Marine, it doesn't list their name first. It says United States Marine and then lists their name, right? How many of us see that with our organizations? James M. Bennett, football player, does this. Not their name. So they automatically identify that person with our organization. So there are a lot of eyes on us. So when we choose to endorse a politician, when we choose to make political stances, when we choose to throw our political ideals out there, understand, first and foremost, a lot of eyes are going to see it. So what does that mean? Well, for everybody who sees it, everybody's going to have a reaction. Now, maybe some of you live in places where almost everybody thinks the same. All right, maybe almost everybody has the same stance on certain things. But I can promise you, it's never everybody. There's always going to be an individual, a family, a person who thinks differently than you. I coach and work in a very diverse school. It's a fantastic place. I love the diversity. I love being able to learn from all these different people. Our coaching staff is uniquely diverse. So keeping that in mind, I have to understand as the leader of this team, as the leader of this organization, that not everybody's going to think the same as me. And there might be people who have complete opposite viewpoints from what I have. And that's okay. That's what we want, right? We've talked about that before. When we get that input from different perspectives, it makes us stronger as an organization. So if I then decide to back a political issue, if I decide to back a political candidate, everybody in my organization is going to have a different reaction to that. All right, let's put it in the context of COVID-19, right? I've seen a lot of coaches, a lot of big name leaders, a lot of people out there in the past few months make big statements about COVID, about, you know, whether they think it's a conspiracy, whether, you know, they think it's unconstitutional, whatever. I'm not getting into the details of that particular mess. But they're making these statements about, and they're political statements by nature, right? And I know when they make those statements, they thinking, well, you know, most people are going to agree with me. I have players who have lost family members to COVID. I have players who have had family members affected by COVID. If I came out and made some statement about whether I think COVID is a conspiracy, whether I believe that or not, I have to keep in mind, how is that going to impact my players who read that, who have lost their grandmother or grandfather? Is that something that they're going to be open to? Is that something that they are going to say, yeah, coach is right on this one? Or is that something that's going to drive a wedge in our relationship? We've talked about this before, how relationships with our people is one of, if not the most important thing. Based upon the relationship we have with our people, we can motivate them and ask them to do things they wouldn't be comfortable doing for other people. We can get them to strive and push harder than they would normally because we have that relationship with them. So if I'm doing something that harms my relationship with my people, it's probably not in the best interest of me as a leader or in the best interest of our organization, right? Now, take that concept, apply it to politicians or political parties or whatever it is you might be. When you put that yard sign in your yard, whether that's a figurative yard sign or whether it's a literal yard sign, right? Maybe you're on Twitter going on and on about this politician or that politician. First of all, that's great that you have an opinion. You are passionate about that. We need more people to have strong opinions about things. But as a leader, our strong opinion might cause some problems. It might create division between me and the people who follow me. It is a false assumption and a very arrogant and egotistical to think that when I make a statement, everybody's going to believe I'm right. That sort of hubris will get us in trouble as coaches because that carries over to other elements. Instead, when we make statements, when we decide to do certain things, we have to keep in mind, how is this going to impact me? How is this going to impact my people? And how is this going to impact my organization? Because as we've talked about before, the organization is the most important thing. It's more important than you as a leader. It's more important than your players. All right. It's all about the organization. Once you have that mindset, that kind of picks up and carries itself, as you'll see. The other thing we have to understand, right, is not only does making political statements or backing politicians possibly harm our reputation and relationship with our players, we also have to keep in mind, what does that really do for us long term? All right. Now, this is going to grind some gears. This is going to bother some people. But as somebody who has worked in politics for a significant amount of time, I'm here to tell you the vast majority of politicians do not care about you. I don't say that from the mindset of, oh, all politicians are evil or, whatever it might be. It's not a put down against people who decide to run for office, because you got to remember, your boy ran for office once upon a time. It simply comes down to, there are so many things going on. The chances that that candidate or that politician really cares about you or your organization is slim to none. They might be interested in making sure you're successful, but at the end of the day, are they going to go out of their way? Are they going to sacrifice what they do for your organization? Now, I say most politicians. I believe in optimism, and I do believe that there are some good individuals out there, typically on the local level. All right. National, they don't give a rip about you. They got too many other things to worry about, right? So when you come out and you say, well, this president is better or this president is better, it's only harming your reputation. It's only making it so that your players are now going to look at you and judge you a certain way, right? Because the minute we attach ourselves, we marry our identity to somebody else's like that by endorsing them, by putting out a tweet, by, constantly railing and being negative about the other side, whatever it might be. The minute we do that, we have now married our identity with the identity of that politician, right or wrong, okay? There's probably a lot of nuance to it, and we may not agree with everything they do, all right? But people don't know that, right? People aren't going to go that in depth. People are going to say, well, he believes in that politician. I don't like that politician. So now all of a sudden, I don't like that you as an individual. I don't like you as my leader. We got to keep that in mind. Again, I'm not telling you not to have political opinions. I'm not telling you not to have stances on things, because I think that's important. All right. Actually, I know that's important. That's why we teach principle-based leadership. But just be careful when you put those things out there. Think of the consequences of making those statements, of making these bold, outrageous claims about how good your candidate is or how bad the other candidate is, okay? I say this as somebody who recently did endorse a local politician, not as the James M. Bennett football coach, but as an individual. Why? He reached out to me. We had a conversation. We got to know each other, and I legitimately do believe he is the best man for a local elected position. I don't do that often. I don't do that regularly. I did that because he reached out to me and we got to know one another. Would I do that for anybody who asked? Absolutely not. But he's, it goes back to the optimism. I feel he is somebody who truly cares about our local community. That said, I'm not going to go out there and make grandiose statements about what he is, who he is, and what he's capable of. I'm also not going to go out there and make grandiose public statements about how bad his opponent is. Because at the end of the day, that's not what I'm about, right? That's not what we're about. We're about building relationships in a diverse setting, even in a community, right? Say you had this community where everybody looked the same, acted the same, talked the same, and thought the same way, right? We had that community. If you had 75 players on your team, I guarantee there's at least one of them who thinks differently than you. Why? Because that's how humanity works. Our background of what we've learned, of who we are, our cultural identity, all of that goes into our brain and inputs our opinion on political things. So if I'm going to be making political statements, if I'm going to be making harsh judgments of people or harsh judgments of issues, and I put that out there publicly, understand what that's going to do for my reputation as a leader. Understand how that might drive a wedge in the relationship of me and my players. And if you're comfortable with that, if you're comfortable with the relationship you have with your players and you're willing to do that, by all means, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm simply giving you this information to input into your brain and maybe think through that process of putting out these political statements. So just keep that in mind. For every action, there's a consequence. And making political statements, making harsh political judgments, constantly commenting on certain candidates or certain issues is going to give you a reputation, and that could harm the reputation that you're building with your players. And that could harm the relationship that you're developing with your players and or your people in your organization. So always keep that in mind. As a leader, we are under a microscope, and who we choose to identify ourselves with and who we choose to marry our ideals with will reflect back on who we are. So make sure the people that you're choosing to support, the people that you're choosing to back and you're choosing to make statements about, make sure that that's not going to destroy your reputation. Make sure they're people of high character and high quality before you go tweeting out your 240 character thoughts on this current political situation in this world. Again, do what you want. All right, because you're a grown adult. Tweet what you want, say what you want. I won't judge you otherwise because I'm an adult as well and you're entitled to your opinion. But at the same time, understand how not everybody thinks that way and understand how that could harm your reputation and your relationship with stakeholders in your organization. Now, the same concept also applies to things outside of politics. Story time. One of our local municipalities has offered trash service to their people living there for quite a while. They have stopped offering trash service, and they are going to contract out to a trash company. No problems with that conceptually. If it saves the city money, do what you have to do. However, the company they have chosen to contract out to is one of the worst reviewed trash companies I have ever seen. Last time I checked, they have less than 2 stars on any review organization you ever met. It's a trash company that I have used personally and left because their service was so bad. So what am I saying? What's the point of this story? As the leader of an organization, as the figurehead of an organization, like we just talked about, everything you do, every person you relate to, whether it's a political candidate or in this case a business, reflects back on you. So who you choose to do business with, maybe you've got a company who's willing to cut a big check to your organization, right? And anybody who coaches high school level sports knows how important those sponsorship donations are, and I get it. Maybe this company is willing to cut you a big check as a sponsorship, but maybe it's a company with a really, really bad reputation. Understand that by accepting their donation, you are also accepting them as a company. So if I take that donation and people find out, which they probably will because there's probably some sort of sponsorship program where you put their sign up or you put it in your game day flyer, whatever it might be, people will judge our organization and me as a leader based upon their impression of the company. And some of you might not care about that, right? I've met some people who go, I don't care what people think about me. If you don't care what people think about you and you don't care about your reputation as a leader, then you're probably not going to have a successful organization. That doesn't mean that you kowtow and you give in to everybody who's a critic, because you have to be comfortable in who you are, but you have to keep in mind your reputation, because your reputation as a leader, especially as a head coach or a CEO or whatever it might be, will be reflected on people's belief in the reputation of your program. So when you choose to do business with a company that's maybe a little suspect or has some really bad reviews or whatever it might be, understand that people will judge you based upon their thoughts on that company. I'm not telling you not to take that check. That is a decision you have to make as a leader, right? That's one of the things we're paid to do, is make tough decisions. So that's your decision to make as a leader of that organization. But just keep in mind that whatever you do in that case will reflect on your reputation. So you take that check, you publish their logo in your book, people open your game day flyer and go, ooh, I don't know. If he's willing to work with that company, do I really want to be someone who works with this organization? What's the reputation of this organization? That's not to say you're going to make everybody happy. I think we all know that already. But especially if it's a company that has a reputation amongst most people that's not very good, in my opinion, you're probably better off saying, hey, we appreciate your donation. I can't accept it this time. And that's okay as well. It's okay to tell people no. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we've been talking about today, is understanding that your reputation as a leader and your organization's reputation is directly related to who you choose to tie yourself into. Whether it's a political candidate, whether it's a political party, whether it's a political ideal, whether it's a political issue, whatever it is, choosing to identify yourself with those people, choosing to make stances in support or against those ideas, will affect your reputation as a leader, both positively and negatively maybe. And any sort of impact you have on your reputation as a leader is indubitably, that's your SAT word for the day, going to impact your relationship with your people, which is the most important part of being a leader. So always keep that in mind when you're going to make a political statement, or whether you're going to make a stance on something, whatever it might be. Whatever you decide to do is going to impact the relationship of you and your people. You hope it's a positive impact on the relationship, but keep in mind, things like politics and political issues are very divisive. There's a good chance it's going to have a negative impact on the relationship you have with your people. And then, by process, it's also going to have a negative impact on the reputation of your program. Same thing applies to who we choose to do business with, whether it's a business we're contracting out to do something, whether it's a sponsorship that's writing us a check to support our team, whatever it might be. Whoever we choose to do business with, just like the politicians, is going to impact your reputation as a leader and the reputation of your organization. Keep that in mind when you make decisions. And I know it's easy to make snap decisions as emotions run high, right? We're 5 days away from the election. We're dealing with all the COVID stuff. Just get on social media and you can see everybody's an expert. But before you pump out that tweet, before you post that Facebook status, think about the long-term consequences of your reputation as a leader and how it's going to impact the reputation of your organization and the relationship with the people in your organization. Because at the end of the day, organizational success is the number one thing we want. And anything that impacts that negatively is probably something we want to shy away from. Again, guys, I appreciate you tuning in today. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to tell me how wrong I am and leaders should be making strong political stances, let me know. All right. I'd love to talk to you about it. All my contact info will be there on the screen. If you're listening versus watching, email is dustin@anchordownleadership.com or info@anchordownleadership.com. I'm active on Twitter @Dustin W. Mills or @AD_leadership, Instagram @AD_leadership, or on Facebook, Dustin Mills, or Anchor Down Leadership as well. Look us up. We'd love to talk to you. I appreciate you guys tuning in today. Being a leader is always a difficult challenge, and in the era of hyper-partisan politics and constant scrutiny, it's become even more challenging. So we have to keep that in mind as we make decisions about who we support or what we support or the statements we're going to make and how that's going to impact the people in our organization and the reputation of our organization. So as always challenge the status quo, find ways to keep getting better, and anchor down to your core values. Have a great week, everybody.